And joining us to talk about this breakthrough moment for Poland and other countries in Central Eastern Europe is Professor Marek Wierzbicki from Institute of National Remembrance and John Paul II Catholic University of Lublin. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
Now, I would like to go to the beginning because the decision to organize these elections was made by communists after the negotiations at the round table. Now, what happened there during this round table negotiations and what triggered communists to actually hold these elections?
Yes, it was a long process that led to the start of the round table talks, but it was started already in the middle of the 1970s when an acute economic crisis began, which led the Polish society, especially workers, to go on strike in 1980. And then the Solidarity movement was established in Poland. And that was the movement that represented the interests of all the Polish society, all the Polish nation. And they demanded more freedom, more political freedom, more subjectivity in political life. And they thus undermined the monopoly of the communist authorities in Poland, the Communist United Workers' Party. But the communists, in order to regain this monopoly, imposed martial law on the 13th of December 1981, trying to regain power, regain influence on the Polish state and society. And they utilized hundreds of thousands of soldiers, thousands of tanks and militia members to do so. And Solidarity was delegalized in 1981 and 1982 formally, despite numerous protests organized by most active part of the Polish society. But after a few years, in the middle of the 1980s, the economic crisis became so radical, so painful for the Polish society that most of it became totally disappointed with the communist system and demanded some radical change, economic and political change as well. And they wanted to replace the communist political and economic system with a capitalist system and parliamentary democracy. And that was why so many people voted for Solidarity in 1989. And the communist authorities realized that they had to persuade a moderate part of the Polish opposition, Solidarity movement, to take responsibility on harsh economic reforms that were to be undertaken by the communist authorities, economic reforms. But most of the Polish society gave them a red card on the 4th of June 1989, thus led to the creation of the first non-communist government led by Tadeusz Mazowiecki as prime minister.
Right, and then the deep economic reforms really began in earnest. Tell me, back in 1989 on June 4th, what was the feeling like back then? Because I think a lot of people, who could be watching maybe weren't alive at that time or don't quite understand the significance and how truly proud Poles must have been feeling at the time.
These elections were quite popular, but not all of the Polish society decided to take part in it. About 62% of the Polish citizens took part in the elections, in the voting process. But the mood among the society became extraordinarily joyful because everybody hoped for a radical change, and they realized that it was possible only when the communist regime would be abolished as a result of the elections. So when all Poland realized and heard about the landslide electoral victory of the Solidarity movement, the mood intensified, and in the next weeks everybody expected some radical political changes. And suddenly, in August 1989, it was announced that both the Solidarity deputies as well as former Communist Party allies from the peasant movement and democratic movement decided to establish a coalition. And thus they somehow outmaneuvered the communists who did not realize, did not expect that to happen. And that was the start of radical reforms that led to the abolishment of the communist system and the creation of market economy as well as the parliamentary democracy.
Right. Now, for the communists to be able to completely, well, to give up power, so to say, that must have been also difficult to achieve, and they had to be given some guarantees. What were those guarantees that were given that would allow this peaceful transition to take place?
First of all, we should put all those events in international context, in the international context of the 1980s, especially 1989, the end of Cold War, the reforms in the Soviet Union in the Gorbachev era. And Gorbachev officially announced that he would not be interested in what was happening in Poland at the end of the 1980s. So he did not intend to stop political and economic reform in Poland as well. But of course, everybody realized that all the military as well as militia security forces were in the hands of the communist authorities, and therefore, in this new government, non-communist government, the Ministry of Defense as well as Ministry of Internal Affairs were held by two communist apparatchiks who were both generals, and one of them a soldier, and another one, General Czesław Kiszczak, was a security services member.
Mm-hmm. Now, how difficult was this transition? Because as you said, right after the elections, there were still left some communist residue in Polish politics and economy. But for regular people, how difficult was this transition? Even though it was like a sour and sweet moment, but people actually went through a lot at that moment, right after these elections.
I think we should realize that the second half of the 1980s was especially harsh a period of time for the Polish people due to the intensifying economic crisis. So they had known very well before 1989 what the crisis meant for them. But after the election, after 1989, when the non-communist government was set up in Poland, they thought that the capitalist system and parliamentary democracy would be introduced very quickly, and they did not realize that it demanded a lot of renunciation, a lot of difficult moments, and it was the case in Poland. The living standard even lowered after 1989 for a few years. Unemployment emerged, which had been unknown to Poles under communist regime, and also there was a lot of intensification of petty crime across Poland, and also mafias appeared in Poland. So the first years of the transition from communism to capitalism was exceptionally difficult, especially for people from provincial areas of Poland, because people in bigger cities benefited from the transition much earlier and faster than people from smaller towns or even villages, who very often lost their jobs and nobody cared about them.
Mm-hmm. And many people left Poland as well.
Yes. In the 1980s, we had a phenomenon of a huge wave of emigration. It was partly political, but partly also economic, because of economic reasons. And about 1 million young, well-educated people left Poland, most of them for good.
Now, briefly at the end, I'm sorry, this happened 35 years ago, so really not that long ago. Do you believe that younger generation is taking democracy for granted, briefly?
Oh yes, I think so. They do not realize how it was under communism. And sometimes when I tell them about this, something about this, they hear this. They can hear this like a tale about pyramids, ancient pyramids, as well as some medieval times. But those who lived under communism realize how bad such a political and economic system can be for ordinary people. So we, the older generation, fully realize how good it is to live under democracy and capitalism.
All right.
Certainly.
Marek Wierzbicki from Institute of National Remembrance and John Paul II Catholic University of Lublin, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure.